Alright, welcome back to PacWestBigfoot.com. This is David, and this week we're going to go over a little encounter that I received from a frantic little family out of Northern California. Currently, they are having some investigation going on around their home. By the way, just so you know, some updates starting this week. I'll be doing some live interviews, and those will be for playback on either Friday afternoons or Saturday mornings. They'll be ready for you here on the website and also on the YouTube channel, so you can grab them there if you wish. Also, I have a mute button now, so you didn't hear me just cough just a second ago. There we go. Alright, so let's get started with this week's encounter story, and here it is. Kids encounter Bigfoot outside bedroom window in Oric, California. Okay, the creepiest thing was for my kids to tell me they had an encounter with Bigfoot outside their window one night. Here is what it was and is happening on our property in Oric. There are some people here investigating today. I will not divulge what organization they are with, but they are here and they are extremely helpful, actually. Here's what happened at first that led up to my children and I having a scary encounter with a Bigfoot outside their window one night, and what I really think was happening. And just so you know, these are not friendly forest creatures either. It starts things that scream in the night. We had been there 8 months by the time we figured out something more sinister was happening. Not sinister in some person was trying to kidnap our kids. It was more like large predators were hanging out around our property and our kids were at risk. To tell you a pitiful truth, they had mentioned something once, and I did not believe them. I know it sounds horrible, but when your kids tell you there is a monster at their window, well, most of it think it was just a nightmare, and let it go at that. After it turned out that they did, well, I still feel bad about it today. So it all started about 2 months after moving to Oric. We had just moved from another small NorCal town and moved into a nice place just north of town around the Skunk Cabbage Creek area, and that is as specific as I will get concerning where we live for now. I will not mention why we moved here either, as our jobs in such a small town would be a dead giveaway of who we are, and we wish to keep this to ourselves for now at least. And just so you know, as I stated above, the visits still happen, but they do not come as close to the house any longer. Besides, if they did, my husband and I would prove they exist with a dead body of one, of which the world demands today. I am not much for killing animals, trust me. I'm no hunter and no fan of guns except for the protection purposes. Today we own 2 handguns and a 30-06. We keep high and out of the reach of our children, and we own them for only one reason: the Bigfoot on our property. About 2 months into living here, I awoke to a couple sounds one night. The sounds of what I could easily describe as, well, screaming from across the property. I could tell they were coming from the far back part of the property. Actually, out past our property, we only have a few acres here, which is backed by a small open area lined on all sides by low-lying tree-covered hills. My husband heard them a couple of times as well over the next few weeks, but he told me they were from a mountain lion, so we decided to purchase a couple of guns at the time for safety out and about on the property with the kids. The screams would come and go for a few weeks or more, and we sat safely believing cougars were the reason, and that no such thing as a large ape-like apex predator was the cause. Not even close. The first face in the window. I remember that morning vividly now. It was the morning I regret even today. My kids came to me frightened, but I never thought it was real, that it was a literal monster was in their window. I am, and was back then, a very protective mama bear. Seriously, that I thought they were just making it up, one of them sharing a nightmare and the other old enough to know the difference between dreams and fact. I have 2 girls, and at the time one was 5, the other was 3. That morning, the 5-year-old came to me a little shaken up with a story of a monster looking in her window right at her. She told me it was bent over looking in. It had red eyes and it had hair like Daddy's face. Of course, my husband said Bigfoot was at her window, as a joke, one I did not laugh at. This was one of my babies, and I was not going to add to the fear. My husband is a light-hearted guy. He likes to joke a bit when things get complicated or rough. It is how he deals with things. Me, on the other hand, well, I have to admit my sense of humor was missing from my particular gene pool. I remember patting her head, giving her a hug, and telling her it was just a dream. She looked at me as if it were the gospel, that it was, and the conversation ended. The screams get closer to home. It was late, around 11:12 midnight, when my husband and I were scared out of our sleep. It was louder, which meant it was closer, but this scream turned to almost a howl that was high-pitched and long-winded. It came from the back of the house near our bedrooms again, but like I said, closer to the house. Either that, or it is what they say. Bigfoot have large lung capacity and infrasound. My husband jumped out of the bed and looked out the window. He could not see anything. Even with a little street light out in the front of the driveway, the thick, low fog this time of the year around the coastal region kept visibility to almost nothing. It would not be until morning that we would discover how close they, were to the house. He woke up a little early that morning, my husband, and headed out the back door. It was about 20 minutes later that he came back through the back door and into the kitchen with a somewhat perplexed expression on his face. All he could come up with was that it was probably a hoax by some young folks nearby. What he found were large footprints. Well, 2 large footprints in the mud, and a flattened trail through the tall grass that led to the edge of the woods to the back of the property. Of course, he did not enter the woods for safety reasons, no gun or protection of any kind at that time. He did mention that they were rather large prints and looked very real, almost too real for his comfort. Just in case, he called the local authorities. He made no recorded report about it, just gave them a heads up, just in case the hoaxsters got too carried away. For the next week or two, the screams persisted far off, but not as close to the house as that night. But that would not last. Handprint on the window. With all the signs of someone or something visiting our property at night, the next time, a few weeks later actually, when my oldest daughter told me about the monster at the window had come back, I stood to attention that time and decided to take a look myself. I asked her what it looked like and what it was doing at the time. Cute as she is sometimes, she climbed on her bed, laid down, and started telling me about what she saw the night before. She said it was bent over looking through the window again. Its eyes were big and they glowed red, and she said it kept tapping the window and pushed on the edge of it a little bit. At that moment I started freaking out a bit as I looked over to see smudge marks on the window, close to the top edge of it. The windows are about an average height as far as from the ground to the top is concerned. So a person being bent over would make them pretty tall, I thought. Not too tall, but at least 7+ feet in stature. And that's pretty tall. Honestly, it were the smudges on the window that got me, and when I went out to take a look at them, I noticed impressions on the ground. I took it as footprints, but I could not be sure other than they were impressions of something heavy around the window. The smudges looked like palms, maybe paws, I thought at first, but eventually my second guess was correct. My first guess was correct, and it was the guess I wanted most of all to be wrong. But as much as I wanted to believe they were paws, they looked like palms. No fingers, just the palms of a person. My husband tried to convince me they were paw prints, however. Maybe the jokesters leaving footprints and blasting the screams at night had a dog getting close to the house, too. It was too big, though, I thought to myself. The red eyes of Bigfoot. The screams faded away for a week or so, I remember, but the moment they were back, I decided to camp out a couple nights with the girls in their room. Like I said, a mama bear will do whatever is necessary for her little ones. My husband decided to crash on the couch watching ESPN each night, as I recall, with the rifle he'd just purchased under the couch, just in case. It was late, well past midnight on the second night of the sleepover with my daughters, and for some reason I was not sleeping well. As a matter of fact, I woke up with an almost frantic feeling. I looked up at the girls, and they were fast asleep. All seemed good, except for one thing. It was dark, too dark in the room. The light from outside should at least be giving off some light into the room, I remember. I looked up, and there it was, leaning down into the window, staring right at me. A Bigfoot. A creature, a monster from legend I never ever expected, stood in real life right outside the window. It would take a moment before I grabbed the girls and ran out of the room screaming. I was there long enough to see my daughter was telling the truth, and that hurt me later on. Not believing her at first simply crushed me. As she had described to me before, this thing did have large reddish eyes, and I was also correct about how tall it was. However, I was off at least a foot. This thing had to be at least 8 feet tall. Hairy. I could tell it was hairy, but not how hairy. My husband would tell me how hairy they were himself later. It looked at me in a menacing way, I believe, slapped its knuckles or the back of its hand against the window, and disappeared into the night quickly. That was it. It just gave me a face of dislike, and it was gone. I grabbed the girls and ran screaming down the hall to the living room, where my husband was awake and wide-eyed, wondering what was happening. Before I realized it, my husband was out the door with his rifle in hand. I sat there with the girls in my arms on the couch until he returned, reassuring the oldest that everything was okay. Not that I truly believed they were, but I did not want my little girls upset and scared anymore. He came back in panting, but, being a pretty smart guy, not wanting to upset them anymore either, he did not start in on what he encountered outside at that moment. We left the girls asleep on the couch after a bit and went into the kitchen to talk. My husband said he saw it. Them, actually. He could only make out size and shape, as they seemed to move rather fast, and there was 2 of them. They stayed out of the direct light coming from the street light in the driveway. Tall, both of them, he said, were very tall, at least 8 feet, and one of them might have been a little taller than the other. He was pretty sure about them being hairy. They seemed to be covered with it, and there was no way in the world, he said, that they were people, as in human beings. I knew that for a fact myself. That face was not human, I told him. We had a friend on the police force, made one when we called with our concern earlier about someone on the property. Of course, we would not be putting in an official report. Besides, who would believe it? He did, however, tell us that this area has had these types of reports before, and that there was a somewhat local team of researchers out of Willow Creek in the Eureka area who would be willing to come up and take a look around if we wanted. To our surprise, he stated he believed they were real and did some background research on the subject in his spare time. But, as I said, he told us about the research group and that we could contact them ASAP. We did. We contacted them minutes later, in fact, after he left. However, after calling them, they would not be able to come for nearly 2 weeks, as they said they were currently investigating a hot spot at the moment. That was fine with us, and for added safety, my husband decided to take the gun out once every evening for target practice. Apparently, we truly believe this to this day, but it seemed to keep these things away from the house, or at least from coming too close to it after that. I am with those who believe that these things are rather intelligent. They know what guns are, and they have a certain respect or concern for them. Getting at my children. After the further questioning of my oldest daughter over the next few days, I have come to believe that these things, these animals, predators more like it, were trying to get at her, or both of them. I have heard of stories where kids go missing in the blink of an eye quietly in the woods, and that just freaks me out to no point. I've also heard of people simply going missing in general. Personally, I think these things were trying to figure out a way to get in and get them. My daughter said that they would tap on the glass and knock lightly on the wall, all the while making faces, scary faces as she put it. It was more than once, too. She said they were there rather often, and once she said it whistled at her. I shuddered to think about it at the time and now, but what if she had opened the window? What if she did and left it open on left it open on accident? Talk about feeling horrible. Failed mother. I can't believe I did not take what they said to heart at first. To think that some wild predator like that was trying to get at my children. Even now I still feel rather guilty. I'm feeling better, but still guilty. Unfortunately, because of our situation then and now, we could not just up and move. We had the home loan type, the home loan type we have. We would have to stay there for a few years or so before we could sell. So it meant we would always be outside when the girls wanted to play, and there was always a gun around, which made me feel uncomfortable at first, yes. I was, at the time, not a huge gun advocate. I am today, however. With the gun going off every other day, the night visits to the windows seemed to have stopped. However, footprints are still found within 40 to 50 yards or so of the house. When my husband and a friend of his would venture out to snoop around a bit on the property, they would find them. The Bigfoot Crew's research. It's been months since the Bigfoot stopped coming to my kids' window at night. Today we actually have a pretty popular research group out here. They have come up with a few casts of footprints and one recording a howl of some kind, and when they let me, I will share them with the public. For now, though, they are holding on to what they have recorded on our property, but they have assured us that they will share it all with us. I am freaked out about all of this. I am still feeling guilty for not believing my daughters in the first place, and I am still trying to process the fact that these creatures actually exist. My husband and I decided to move the day we can sell this place. We just don't want to risk our children and ourselves with these Bigfoot predators running around the hills and on our property in Oric. Thank you.